No one wakes up expecting that a single moment, a few careless words, can change the course of multiple lives forever. That afternoon, the sun was beginning to set over the coastal highway, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange. Traffic was light, the air calm, the kind of peaceful shift every officer hopes for. Officer Alejandra Jimenez stood near her patrol car, watching vehicles pass by with trained attention. She had been on duty for hours, but her focus never wavered. Discipline was not just part of her job. It was part of who she was. Then she saw it. A luxury car pulled into a scenic overlook nearby. The passenger door opened and a woman casually tossed an empty drink can onto the ground, right beside a trash bin. Alejandra frowned. It wasn't just littering, it was the attitude behind it. She approached calmly, her boots crunching softly against the gravel. "Good evening, ma'am," she said firmly but politely. "Please step out of the vehicle and pick up the trash you just threw." The woman turned slowly, clearly irritated. "Are you serious?" she scoffed. "It probably just fell next to the bin." Alejandra maintained her composure. "Ma'am, regulations are clear. Please pick it up." The driver, a man wearing expensive sunglasses and an arrogant smile, leaned back in his seat, watching the exchange with amusement. The woman rolled her eyes dramatically before stepping out and grabbing the can. "There," she said with sarcasm. "Happy?" Alejandra nodded. "Thank you. Please make sure it doesn't happen again." For a moment it seemed the situation was over, but then everything changed. As Alejandra turned to leave, the driver spoke. "Hey, officer," he called out. "You don't even know who you're talking to." Alejandra stopped. Slowly, she turned back. "I'm talking to a citizen," she replied calmly, "and the law applies equally to everyone." The man removed his sunglasses. And that's when she saw the insignia on his uniform shirt lying across the seat. Lieutenant rank, a superior officer. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The woman crossed her arms, smirking now. "You might want to rethink your attitude," she said, "before you regret it." Alejandra felt the familiar pressure rising in her chest, the silent threat that every honest officer eventually faces. Power, connections, influence. But she also felt something stronger. Integrity. "Driver's license and vehicle registration," she said firmly. The lieutenant laughed. "You're making a big mistake." Maybe she was. But what happened next would prove that the biggest mistake that day wasn't hers. The lieutenant stepped out of the car slowly, adjusting his jacket as if he owned the entire road. His presence carried the confidence of someone who had never been told no in his life. Up close, Alejandra could see the arrogance written across his face. "What's your name, officer?" he asked, not as a question, but as a challenge. "Sub-Officer Alejandra Jimenez," she replied. "Now I need your license and registration." Instead of complying, he chuckled and glanced at his girlfriend. "Did you hear that?" he said mockingly. "She's serious." The woman laughed. Alejandra felt the eyes of passing motorists slowing down, watching the scene unfold. Public confrontations were never ideal, but she couldn't back down now. "Sir," she said firmly, "you're currently in violation of public sanitation regulations, and failure to comply may result in a citation." The lieutenant's smile disappeared. "You really don't recognize me?" he asked. "It doesn't change the law," she replied. For a moment, silence hung between them. Then he leaned closer. "You're going to regret this," he whispered. Alejandra didn't move. "License and registration." He stared at her for several seconds before finally pulling out his wallet and tossing the documents toward her chest. They hit her uniform and fell to the ground. The humiliation was intentional. The girlfriend smirked again. Alejandra bent down slowly, picked up the papers, and kept her voice steady. "Thank you." Inside, though, her stomach burned. She wrote the citation carefully, every movement controlled, professional. When she handed it to him, he looked at it, then crumpled it in his fist, and threw it back at her face. The paper bounced off her shoulder and fell to the dirt. "You think you can find me?" he said loudly. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." The girlfriend crossed her arms proudly. "That's what happens when small people get a little authority," she added. Alejandra felt heat rising behind her eyes. Not tears, anger, but she swallowed it. Because losing control would only give them exactly what they wanted. "Sir," she said quietly, "you are now interfering with official duties." "Oh, please," he laughed. "You're lucky I don't have you reassigned to parking duty by tomorrow morning." And then he stepped closer, lowering his voice again. "Here's what's going to happen," he said. "You're going to forget this ever happened." Alejandra looked directly into his eyes. No. That single word sealed her fate. Within minutes, a call was made, and everything spiraled out of control, because the next person to arrive wasn't there to support her. He was there to break her. The sound of another vehicle approaching echoed across the overlook. Alejandra turned her head and saw a black official SUV pulling in fast, gravel spraying behind the tires. Her heart sank. She already knew what this meant. The lieutenant smirked confidently. "Perfect timing," he murmured. The SUV stopped abruptly and a senior officer stepped out, Colonel Cheo Fernandez, one of the most powerful names in the department. Alejandra straightened her posture immediately and saluted. "Good afternoon, sir." But before she could speak further, the lieutenant walked toward the colonel with exaggerated frustration. "Sir, I'm glad you came," he said loudly. "This officer has completely disrespected authority." The girlfriend chimed in dramatically. "She threatened us over a simple misunderstanding, completely out of line." Alejandra felt the narrative being rewritten in real time. The colonel looked at her, then at the lieutenant, then at the crumpled citation on the ground. "What is going on here?" he asked coldly. "Sir," Alejandra began calmly, "they violated public sanitation regulations. I issued a citation according to procedure. The lieutenant refused to comply and interfered with—" "That's enough," the colonel interrupted. The words hit harder than any slap. He turned to the lieutenant. "Why are you in handcuffs?" he asked, noticing the situation escalating. Alejandra answered before the lieutenant could speak. "Sir, he refused to provide documents and showed aggressive behavior toward an officer during duty." The colonel's expression darkened. "And you think that justifies this?" he asked sharply. Alejandra hesitated for half a second. "Yes, sir. Regulations apply equally to—" "Take the cuffs off. Now." The order landed like thunder. Alejandra froze. "Sir, I cannot do that," she said carefully. "The procedure—" "Are you refusing a direct order?" the colonel snapped. Every nerve in her body screamed danger. Around them, the lieutenant watched with satisfaction, knowing exactly what was happening. This wasn't about the law anymore. This was about hierarchy, power, control. Alejandra swallowed. "No, sir," she said quietly. With steady hands, she removed the cuffs. The lieutenant rubbed his wrists dramatically, glaring at her with triumph. The colonel stepped closer to Alejandra. "You need to understand something," he said in a low, threatening tone. "There are rules. And then there is reality." Alejandra felt humiliation creeping into her chest, but she held her posture. "I was just doing my job, sir." The colonel leaned even closer. "Your job," he said, "is to know who you're dealing with." Then he stepped back. "I expect you in my office tomorrow morning," he continued coldly. "We'll discuss disciplinary measures." Disciplinary measures for following the law. The lieutenant laughed softly behind him, and just when Alejandra thought it couldn't get worse, it did. Because the colonel turned to her again and said, "Apologize to the lieutenant." The words felt unreal, but what happened next would leave a scar she would never forget. For a moment, Alejandra thought she had misheard. The wind moved softly across the overlook, carrying the distant sound of waves crashing against the rocks below. Everything felt strangely quiet. "Sir?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The colonel's expression didn't change. "You heard me," he said coldly. "Apologize." The lieutenant crossed his arms, enjoying every second. His girlfriend smirked openly now, no longer hiding her satisfaction. Alejandra felt something tighten inside her chest. Not fear, not exactly anger. Something deeper. Injustice. I followed procedure, she said carefully. There is nothing to apologize for. The colonel's eyes hardened instantly. You're not in a position to argue, he replied. You embarrassed a superior officer in public. He violated regulations, Alejandra said, her voice trembling slightly despite her effort to stay calm. The colonel stepped closer. You're making this worse for yourself. Behind him, the lieutenant picked up the crumpled citation from the ground. He slowly unfolded it, looked at it, then crushed it again into a tight ball. Tell you what, he said casually. She can apologize, and we forget this whole thing ever happened. The girlfriend laughed softly. Seems fair. Alejandra's hands clenched at her sides. Every instinct inside her screamed to walk away. But walking away would mean surrendering everything she believed in. The colonel's patience snapped. That's an order, he said sharply. Silence. Alejandra stared straight ahead, her throat burning. I'm sorry, she said finally. The lieutenant tilted his head. What was that? The colonel didn't intervene. Alejandra forced the words out again. I'm sorry, sir. For a split second, she hoped it would end there, but the lieutenant wasn't finished. He walked closer, until he stood directly in front of her. No, he said quietly. That's not enough. He held out the crushed citation. Write me another ticket. Alejandra blinked in confusion. What? You heard me, he said. Write it again. Her stomach dropped. Slowly, mechanically. She pulled out her notepad and wrote another citation. Her hands trembled slightly. When she finished, she handed it to him. He looked at it, then he crushed it again and shoved it toward her mouth. Put it in, he said. For a second, Alejandra couldn't breathe. The colonel looked away. The girlfriend watched with amusement. Do it, the lieutenant whispered. Or you lose your job. The world seemed to freeze. This wasn't discipline anymore. This was humiliation, power abuse at its worst. Alejandra felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Slowly, with shaking fingers, she took the paper and brought it toward her lips. But in that exact moment, a voice spoke behind them. Stop! The single word cut through the air like a blade. Everyone turned. A man in uniform stood a few meters away, his expression calm, but his eyes sharp. Alejandra had never seen him before, but the lieutenant's face suddenly lost all color, because the person who had just arrived was someone even more powerful than the colonel, and he had seen everything. For a few seconds, no one moved. The new officer walked forward slowly, his boots echoing against the pavement with calm authority. He wasn't rushing. He didn't need to. The confidence in his posture made it clear. This was someone used to being obeyed. Alejandra lowered her hand, still holding the crushed paper, her heart pounding against her ribs. The lieutenant's voice came out strained. Who are you? He asked. The man stopped a few steps away. Lieutenant Jose Daniel Herrera, he replied evenly. Newly assigned supervisory officer. The colonel frowned. The new supervisor? He said. You were supposed to report tomorrow. Herrera nodded slightly. I arrived earlier than expected, he answered. His eyes moved from the colonel to the lieutenant, then finally to Alejandra, and for a brief moment, something changed in his expression. Recognition, concern, but he remained composed. Would someone like to explain what is happening here? He asked calmly. The lieutenant immediately stepped forward. Just a misunderstanding, he said quickly. The officer overreacted, but we've already resolved it. Herrera didn't look convinced. He glanced at Alejandra. Officer? He asked gently. Alejandra hesitated. Every instinct told her to stay quiet. Speaking up could make everything worse. But something about his tone felt different. Respectful. Safe. She was issuing me a citation, the lieutenant interrupted before she could answer. And she became disrespectful. Herrera turned slowly toward him. And the paper? He asked, nodding toward Alejandra's hand. The lieutenant shrugged. She was just apologizing. Herrera's eyes narrowed slightly. Apologizing by putting paper in her mouth? He asked. Silence fell again. The girlfriend shifted uncomfortably. The colonel cleared his throat. "Lieutenant Herrera," he said firmly, "this is an internal matter. I've already handled it." Herrera looked at him for several seconds. "With respect, sir," he replied calmly. "Public misconduct involving officers is never just internal." The colonel's jaw tightened. "You're new here," he said. "You don't understand how things work yet." Herrera's voice remained steady. "I understand regulations," he replied. "And I understand abuse of authority." The lieutenant laughed nervously. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he said. "We were just having a conversation." Herrera didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "I recorded the last 3 minutes," he said calmly. The words hit like an explosion. The lieutenant's face went pale. The colonel froze. The girlfriend stopped smiling. Alejandra's heart skipped a beat, because suddenly, the balance of power had shifted completely, and the people who thought they were untouchable were about to realize they weren't. For a moment, no one spoke. The lieutenant stared at the phone in Herrera's hand as if it were a weapon pointed directly at him. "You recorded this?" he asked, his voice suddenly dry. Herrera nodded once. "Yes." The colonel stepped forward immediately, lowering his voice. "Lieutenant Herrera," he said carefully, "there's no need to escalate this situation. We can resolve it internally." Herrera looked at him calmly. "Internal resolution," he replied, "does not include humiliation, coercion, or abuse of rank." The words landed heavy in the air. Alejandra felt her chest tighten. For the first time since the confrontation began, someone was speaking the truth out loud. The lieutenant tried to recover his confidence. "You don't understand," he said quickly. "This officer disrespected me first." Herrera tilted his head slightly. "I saw an officer enforcing regulations," he replied. "And I saw a superior attempting to intimidate her into violating protocol." The girlfriend crossed her arms defensively. "This is ridiculous," she said. "It was just a joke." Herrera's gaze moved to her briefly. "Threatening someone's career is not a joke," he said. Silence. The colonel exhaled slowly, clearly calculating his next move. "Let's be practical," he said. "You're new. You don't want to start your assignment creating enemies." Herrera's eyes didn't move. "I didn't create this situation," he replied. "They did." The lieutenant's patience finally cracked. "Do you know who you're talking to?" he snapped. Herrera met his stare without blinking. "Yes," he said calmly. "An officer currently abusing authority." The words hit harder than any punch. Alejandra felt a surge of disbelief. No one, ever, spoke to this lieutenant like that. The colonel's tone hardened. "You're crossing a line," he warned. Herrera's voice remained composed. "No, sir," he said. The line was crossed when an officer was forced to degrade herself under threat of losing her job. A long pause followed. Then Herrera looked directly at Alejandra. "Officer Jimenez," he said gently. "Are you all right?" The question almost broke her. She nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." But her voice cracked. And Herrera noticed that was the moment something changed inside him. Because this wasn't just about regulations anymore. This was about justice. He turned back to the lieutenant. "I need you to surrender your service weapon," Herrera said calmly. The lieutenant blinked. "What?" "Your weapon," Herrera repeated. "Now." The girlfriend gasped. The colonel stepped forward. "You can't do that," he said sharply. "He outranks you." Herrera didn't raise his voice. "I have authority to intervene in misconduct involving firearms," he replied. "And I believe alcohol consumption is involved." The lieutenant's face turned red. "That's ridiculous." Herrera extended his hand. "Weapon." For a few seconds, no one moved. Then slowly, reluctantly, the lieutenant reached for his holster and handed it over. The moment felt surreal, because the man who had been humiliating everyone just minutes ago was now losing control, and this was only the beginning. As Herrera secured the lieutenant's weapon, the atmosphere shifted completely. The arrogance that had filled the overlook minutes earlier was gone. Now there was tension, fear, uncertainty. The lieutenant tried to regain control. "This is abuse of authority," he said angrily. "You'll regret this." Herrera remained calm. "If you believe that," he replied, "you're free to report me." The colonel stepped in quickly. "That won't be necessary," he said. "We're done here." Herrera turned toward him slowly. "With respect, sir, we are not." The colonel's eyes narrowed. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. Herrera shook his head. "No," he replied. "The mistake was assuming no one would intervene." Alejandra watched the exchange in disbelief. For years, she had seen how things worked. Connections protected people. Rank protected people. Power protected people. But right now, none of that seemed to be working. The lieutenant scoffed. "You think one recording changes anything?" he said. "I have friends everywhere." Herrera nodded slightly. "I'm counting on that," he said. The lieutenant frowned. "What does that mean?" Herrera looked directly at him. "It means this isn't the first complaint," he said. Silence fell again. Alejandra felt her pulse quicken. "What?" the lieutenant said. Herrera continued. "There have been reports," he said calmly. "Unverified, unsupported, dismissed." The colonel's expression darkened. "You're overstepping," he warned. Herrera didn't react. "But today," he continued, "I have evidence." The girlfriend looked suddenly nervous. "This is insane," she said. "We didn't do anything wrong." Herrera's gaze returned to her. "You encouraged intimidation," he replied. "That makes you a witness." The lieutenant's composure cracked further. "You're ruining your career," he snapped. Herrera's voice remained steady. "My career is based on the law," he said. "Not friendships." Alejandra felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Real hope. Herrera turned toward the colonel again. "Sir," he said respectfully, "I'm requesting that Internal Affairs be notified immediately." The colonel froze. "That's unnecessary," he said. Herrera didn't move. "It's mandatory," he replied. The lieutenant's confidence finally shattered. "You wouldn't dare," he said quietly. Herrera met his eyes. "I already did." The words hit like thunder. Because at that exact moment, in the distance, the sound of approaching sirens echoed across the overlook, and for the first time, the lieutenant looked afraid. The flashing red and blue lights appeared over the curve of the road seconds later. 2 patrol vehicles pulled into the overlook, followed by an unmarked black sedan. Alejandra recognized the insignia immediately. Internal Affairs. Her stomach tightened. Not because she was afraid, but because she knew this moment would change everything. The lieutenant's voice dropped to a whisper. "You actually called them," he said, staring at Herrera in disbelief. Herrera didn't answer. He didn't need to. The agents stepped out of their vehicles with calm professionalism, scanning the scene quickly. One of them approached Herrera. "Lieutenant Herrera?" he asked. "Yes." "We received your report." Herrera nodded and handed over the service weapon. "This belongs to Lieutenant Paul Cando," he said. "Possible misconduct involving alcohol consumption while armed, coercion, and abuse of authority." The lieutenant exploded. "This is outrageous," he shouted. "You can't do this to me." The girlfriend grabbed his arm nervously. "Paul, stop." The Internal Affairs agent turned toward him. "Lieutenant," he said firmly, "please place your hands behind your back." Shock rippled across the scene. Even the colonel looked stunned. "This is unnecessary," the colonel said quickly. "We can handle this internally." The agent shook his head. "With respect, sir, this is already external." Alejandra watched as the lieutenant stepped backward. "You're making a huge mistake," he said, his voice shaking now. "I have connections." The agent didn't react. "Hands behind your back." For a few seconds, the lieutenant didn't move. Then Herrera stepped forward slightly. "It's over," he said quietly. Something in his tone made the truth undeniable. The lieutenant's shoulders dropped. Slowly, he placed his hands behind his back. The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut echoed louder than anything else that day. The man who had humiliated her, the man who thought he was untouchable, was now under arrest. The girlfriend began crying. "This isn't fair," she said. "It was just a misunderstanding." But no one was listening anymore, because consequences had finally arrived. And they were only getting started. As the lieutenant was escorted toward the patrol car, his confidence was completely gone. The arrogance, the mocking tone, the threats, all replaced by raw panic. "You can't do this," he said desperately. "I didn't do anything wrong." One of the internal affairs agents opened the rear door. "You'll have the opportunity to explain everything," he replied calmly. The lieutenant looked toward the colonel. "Cheo, say something," he pleaded. For the first time that day, the colonel had no answer, because Herrera was watching him, closely, carefully, and the colonel knew it. The girlfriend's voice trembled. "Please, he was just upset. He didn't mean it." But the agents remained focused. Procedure, evidence, facts. Things influence couldn't erase anymore. As the lieutenant was placed inside the vehicle, Herrera turned toward the colonel. "There will also be questions regarding your involvement, sir," he said respectfully. The colonel's face stiffened. "My involvement?" he asked. Herrera nodded. "You ordered an officer to disregard procedure," he replied, "and attempted to suppress a misconduct report." Alejandra's heart skipped. She hadn't expected that. The colonel exhaled slowly. "You're very bold for someone new," he said. Herrera's voice remained calm. "I'm very committed to the uniform," he replied. For a moment, the two men stared at each other. A silent battle of power. But this time, the colonel was losing. Internal affairs approached him next. "Colonel Fernandez," one agent said, "we'll need you to come with us as well for questioning." Shock crossed his face. "This is unnecessary," he said sharply. "It's procedure," the agent replied. Alejandra felt the weight of the moment settle over her. Two of the most powerful men in her department, now under investigation, because someone finally said no. The colonel glanced one last time at Herrera. "This isn't over," he said quietly. Herrera nodded slightly. "No," he agreed. "It's just beginning." As the vehicles drove away, silence returned to the overlook. Alejandra stood there, unsure what to say, what to feel: relief, shock, exhaustion. Herrera turned toward her, and for the first time, his expression softened completely. "You did nothing wrong," he said. Those 4 words hit her harder than everything else combined, because after all the humiliation, someone finally saw the truth. The flashing lights had disappeared down the road. The overlook was quiet again, almost peaceful, as if nothing had happened. But for Alejandra, everything had changed. Her hands were still trembling slightly, the adrenaline slowly leaving her body. For several seconds she couldn't speak. Herrera noticed. "Take a breath," he said gently. She inhaled deeply, then exhaled. "I thought," she began, her voice breaking slightly. "I thought I was going to lose my job today." Herrera shook his head. "You were doing your job," he replied. "That's the only thing that matters." Alejandra looked down for a moment. "You don't know how things work here," she said quietly. "People like them, they always win." Herrera was silent for a few seconds, then he answered. "They win, when everyone else stays quiet." She looked up at him. There was no arrogance in his face, no superiority, just conviction. "Why did you help me?" she asked. Herrera smiled faintly. "Because someone once helped me," he said. "When I needed it." The words carried weight, history, experience. Alejandra felt emotion rising in her chest again, but this time it wasn't humiliation. It was relief, respect, validation. Days later, the consequences became official. Lieutenant Paul Cando was suspended immediately pending investigation. Multiple prior complaints resurfaced. Witness statements were collected, evidence reviewed. The colonel was placed on administrative leave for abuse of authority and obstruction. The department issued a public statement reinforcing zero tolerance for misconduct. For Alejandra, something unexpected happened. Instead of punishment, she received recognition, a formal commendation for professionalism under pressure. When the ceremony ended, Herrera approached her again. "You earned this," he said. She shook her head slightly. "I just followed the rules," he nodded. "That's exactly why." For the first time in days, Alejandra smiled, because she finally understood something important. Integrity doesn't always protect you immediately. Sometimes, it puts you in danger. Sometimes, it makes you suffer. But sooner or later, truth catches up with power. And when it does, justice becomes unavoidable. And the biggest mistake someone can make is humiliating the wrong person.